I'll be going over a tutorial on how to play Mysterium. Obviously, this is the Polish version of the game. It is currently March of 2015, and this game is not available in the US yet. However, you can order it directly from Portal Games in Poland. The last I heard, it is slated for release in the US at the end of 2015. At the moment, I believe there are 3 versions of this game. The original, I believe it's the original Ukrainian version, the Polish version, and the Italian version. It sounds like the Ukrainian and Italian versions are similar, and the Polish version is a slight variant. However, I believe that the Polish rules and the Polish game is closest to what is going to be available in the US, which is why that's the rule set I'm going to be going over in this tutorial. Obviously, when it's released in the US, the publisher may make some changes to the exact structure of the rules or the components, but I think for the most part it's going to remain pretty much the same. And as long as you understand the basic gameplay, you're going to be able to play this game very easily, and it is quite accessible to a wide variety of people. So let's take a look. Mysterium is a game for 2 to 7 players, and it is cooperative. One of the players is the ghost of a former resident of a mansion who has been haunting the place. The other players play the paranormal investigators who come in to try and figure out why the ghost is haunting the place. It turns out that he was falsely accused of a murder. It is the job of the paranormal investigators to figure out who actually committed the crime. These are examples of the paranormal investigator cards. The clock token shows what stage of the investigation the paranormal investigators are at. Now, obviously, these are Polish words, but they mean what, where, and who. So it's kind of like Clue mixed with Dixit, because we're going to be using cards to determine who committed the crime. But first, the investigators have to figure out what was used during the crime, where the crime was committed, and then who did it. And the investigators can always work together to try and find the solution. This calendar represents how many rounds or how many days the investigators have to figure out who the murderer was. Because the story is set in France, the days on the calendar are spelled out in French, in case you're wondering why it's not Polish or English. It's lundi, mardi, and etc. These are the cards that you'll be using during the course of the game to determine the actual murderer. The cards with the brown backs are the ones that the investigators will see. The blue-backed cards are for the ghost to use. Now, as you can see, even the artwork on the back of these cards is beautiful. These cards are the items, or the whats. These are the locations, or the wheres. And these are the characters, or the whos. So these are the whodunit characters. But I just wanted to show you some of the artwork on these cards is like stunning. I mean, the artwork is absolutely beautiful. I want this as a painting on my wall. Like, it's just amazing. That's an element of the game that obviously I hope is present in the US version of the game. I can't imagine that it wouldn't be. It's just amazing. But what you will notice is that there's a lot of detail in all of the different cards. The item cards have the least detail, but the location and character cards have detail in them. So this is a porch or a veranda with a rocking chair and a blanket on it, and there's tea set out, and there's what looks like a photo album, and there are birds. So there are a lot of elements that should be taken into account when evaluating a card like this. And I'll show you why when we get to gameplay. All right, let's explain how I set up the game. Obviously, I have this set up in the way that it needs to be for the sake of the video. In reality, you're going to have one of each of these in front of each person that's playing, and you'll set up the cards in such a way that everyone can see them. So each person gets one of these player cards, and they get a clock that goes with it, and they'll start with the clock on the what space. They'll also get a marker in their color, And I've set up the calendar over here with the neutral colored marker starting on day 1. The number of cards you use in the game depends on how many people are playing and the level of difficulty that you're playing. I will put up a chart so you can see it because it's a lot of different possibilities. And if you're playing it and you find that it's too easy or too difficult, you can always add or remove cards the next time you play in order for it to suit your gaming group. But I'm going to show you that chart now so you know how many cards you need for a certain number of players. And what I've set up is a 4-player game on easy, which means that I have 3 investigators, 1 ghost, and 6 each of the clue cards. So I shuffled the item deck and I laid out 6 of these item cards, or the what cards. Then I laid out 6 of the location cards, and then I laid out 6 of the character cards. All the rest of the cards go to the box. And the back of these cards is the brown. These are the cards that the investigators see. Then I went through the ghost decks, which have the blue backing on them, and I pulled out the exact same items that are spread out in front of me. Then I shoveled each of those 6 items individually, and then I laid out a character, a location, and an item from those cards that I shuffled, each of which will match one that's out on the board. And I place a color to match that character to know that that is that player's stack of cards. So I did that for each person. Each person has an item, a location, and a character card that is associated with them that they will have to be deducing during the course of the game. So how does that work? Well, if I'm playing the ghost, I draw 6 cards, and these are dream cards. They have this green backing, and they have different kind of artwork on them. They kind of look like Dixit cards, so they're not as detailed as the cards that the investigators can see, but they are going to hopefully contain clues that I can use as the ghost to give to these paranormal investigators in their sleep. So they will get these dream cards, all of the investigators will be able to see them, then they'll be able to discuss them and try and figure out which one of the items, locations, or characters those dream cards represent. If you're playing on easy mode, once per turn, the ghost may discard their entire hand and draw a new hand, in case they have dream cards that they don't feel are going to help the investigators at all. If you're playing on normal or hard, you can do this 3 times in the course of the game, in which case you might want to have some kind of marker. It's not included in this game. Hopefully it'll be in the US game. If you have 3 dice or rocks or anything from any other game that you can use to toss away each time you've discarded your hand. That way you can keep track of it. If you're playing on the most difficult level, you can do this once per game. I'm only playing this with components that come with the game. If you get this version of the game, or in the US version if they don't include card holders, I would recommend getting card holders. When you're playing with 4 people, it's not too bad to keep track of what all these items are, but once you have 5, 6 players, it can be difficult you're going to be flipping over the cards constantly going, what did they have? What was this? What was that? Whereas if you have card holders, you can set these up in card holders so that the investigators can't see them, but you can reference them. At the beginning of the game, the investigators are trying to determine what was used in the murder. So they're going to be looking only at this first row of cards. And that is what the ghost is going to be giving them in dream cards, is they're going to be giving them clues that are associated with these cards. The ghost can give any number of cards to an investigator to give them clues as to which item, location, or character is associated with that player's stack. Now first, obviously, we're just doing items. So anything that I put out as a ghost is related to an item, and they know that because their clock is on that space. I do find that it can be confusing to give multiple cards to one player at a time, unless it's really obvious that they go together. So I would suggest trying to stick with one card and go from there. So I'm going to look at this first player, and I can give these cards to players in any order. If I have a card that looks like it's going to be great for one of these items, then I can give that one out to this player, and then one to this player, then one to this player. Because each time I give out cards, I can then draw back up to my full complement of 6. So instead of being forced to say, oh my goodness, I have to have 3 out of this hand that are going to describe an item, you have a chance of drawing a card that might be better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these wooden markers off and just put them next to these piles. And then I'm going to look and see what items they have. Now in this case, obviously you don't say this, and in the game the ghost is not supposed to talk at all. You also have to be very careful as the ghost to not stare at certain cards that are out. When you're thinking about which dream cards to put out, you're better off looking at the card that you have in front of you, and then maybe glancing at the other ones to make sure you're not putting down a clue that could indicate one of the other cards. So the white player has the razor. I would not be showing this to the investigators. I'm just showing you that that's what's in his pile. So I'm going to try and give him a clue that would indicate a razor. And in the process, I'm going to try to not give him a clue that would indicate one of the other weapons, because I'm trying to get him to guess it. Again, it's cooperative, so I want him to guess it, but this is the only way I can communicate with him. So I find this card, it's got a lot of things going on in it, because that's the nature of these dream cards. It's got some glowing eyes. It looks like it has some traffic cones. There's a lot of black and some yellow, but up at the top there are these axes with blades on them. So I'm hoping that he figures out that I'm referring to the blades. Now, I'm going to draw up to my full complement of 6 cards, and I want to see what this person has. And again, you can look at all of them. That way you make some better decisions about which cards to play. Like, let me check hers. Okay, and I think I actually have a good one for her. I do. She has the envelope, which I assume was maybe had some poison in it or something to that effect. And I'm going to play this card for this person because it has this paper airplane on it. That seems pretty obvious to me. Now, whether it's obvious to her or not, I don't know. Sometimes what seems obvious to one person is not obvious to another. If you've played Dixit, you will know that. And this player, the yellow player, has the syringe, the medical kit. So I want to try and find a good dream for that one. And let's say I feel like I don't have one. So I'm going to discard my cards, and you should discard them face down. That way the investigators don't see which ones you're throwing away. So make sure you keep your piles separate. So I'm discarding my hand because this is easy mode. And I'm going to draw back up to 6 cards. And hopefully there's one that will work better for that medical kit. And sometimes you will have no card that really works well, but you have to give them something. So I really don't have a good choice, but what I'm going to do is put down this, which you would think, oh, what does that have to do with a medical kit and syringes? The only thing I can think of is that maybe the row of brushes looks like something that would be in a kit or in a case for storage. The only thing else that's left out that might be related to maybe would be the letter, or maybe even the spider, if you think there's a spider hiding in there somewhere. But now what happens, and this can start happening as soon as the first dream card is laid out. While the ghost is going through cards and laying them out, immediately the investigators can start talking about their dream. So the investigators will be talking about their dreams and seeing which ones they think they are. So he's narrowed it down. He thinks this one is either the shuriken or the razor blade. He's not positive which one. So let's say he thinks that it's the shuriken because these are blades, but they're weapons. So he thinks, okay, a bladed weapon. So we'll go with that. And she is like, oh, mine has to be this because it's paper, it's folded paper, that's got to be what it is. And let's say by process of elimination and discussion with the other investigators, they conclude, well, you know what, that's most likely what it could be. Maybe we're wrong, but we're going to go ahead and guess it anyways. So the investigators take their wooden markers and place them on the cards that they think are the ones associated with them. Once that's done, the ghost will tell them who is right and who is wrong. And they'll do that by removing the cards that were correctly guessed. So this was correctly guessed, so it goes off to the pile. This one was correctly guessed, so it's gone off to the pile. And these two dream cards get put back. So now they know he was wrong. He gets to keep his dream card, and he can leave his wooden marker on this item if he wants to remind him that this item was wrong. And the other two get to move their markers down to the where space, which means now these two are going to be looking for locations, and he is still looking for the right item. After that first round is completed, you're going to move the marker from day 1 to day 2. And I'm going to take the items from the dream cards that were associated with them, and those will go to the box. Don't need those anymore. So now as the ghost, I'm going to have to be giving this guy a clue for the item, and these two will be getting clues for locations. So like I say, he gets to keep this clue, and then we'll see if I can give him a clue that will help him out and narrow down his choices. So let's say I give him this one. Again, it has another blade in it, and it definitely doesn't seem to have anything to do with irons or spiders. I could be wrong. He could be thinking something different, but that's what I'll give him. Draw back up to 6. And now I have to consider locations for these guys. So I have to look at the locations that they have. The red player has the location that looks like, I'm not sure, a workshop. There's a barbecue in it. It's this one. Looks like maybe a tea kettle or a hot water kettle. There's a wooden race car. There's some stairs down to a cellar, a bike pump. There's some tools in the background. There's a clock. There's a black and white checkered hanging of some kind. So there's a lot of detail. The location cards can be trickier or easier just because of the amount of detail in the cards. Again, this is another time where it's helpful to have a card holder, and those are, you can find those on Amazon. That's really not a big deal if they don't come with the game. So I have to try and find something for her, and his location is the outdoor location with the tree that has the stairs on it and a swing. There's a hammock that looks like a cricket bat and a ball. There's a bike leaning up against what looks like a tower of some sort, and there's also a wine and some glasses out. So I have to come up with a clue for them. So I'm going to give the yellow character this card because it has a hammock in it. So I'm hoping he'll pick up on the hammock. And it kind of looks outdoorsy like this, and hopefully he won't mistake it for one of the other cards, but you never know. So I draw back up to 6, and then I try to find a clue for red, who has this location, which is the workshop type of location. And meanwhile, the other investigators can be discussing the dream cards that have already been played. So the best card I really have to play for her is this wheel on a wooden path and with a shaft of light. So hopefully she'll figure it out. If not, that's part of the game. So let's say we've given this guy enough clues that he figures out what it is. So he puts his marker on the razor. He has a good enough eye that he catches the hammock that's in this scene, so he places his marker here. And she's really not sure exactly what this means, but it looks like there's a path and maybe some sort of trellis bridge. So she's thinking maybe this leads to a house with the porch. Maybe that's what it is. So she puts her marker over here. So now the ghost tells everyone who is correct and who is not. So the ghost will take this one and show that this is the same, and they will go back to the piles. They'll take their dream cards, and that person gets to move down to the where space. The yellow player was correct, so we get to take that card off the board, and then they go back into their respective piles, either investigator or dream. And then this dream card gets taken back, and he moves to the who spot. Now obviously she was wrong. She gets to keep this clue. Whether or not that's going to be helpful or not, I don't know. But she gets to keep this clue. She can take her marker back or not. At this point, it doesn't really matter as long as the ghost isn't confused about who's finished putting out what where. So we have two people that are on location dreams and one person who's on the character dream. And we move this to the third day. And we can also just take these item cards and put them back in the stack because we're done with those. So we know that her location is this workshop. I'm hoping I get something for that. His location is the crypt. You can see there's a statue, there's a book with a bookmark in it, and a torch, some stairs. And sometimes you can go by color or kind of mood as well. Sometimes this is really tough. I happen to have a couple of cards in my hand that would very clearly point to this as the answer. This is like a ship with a diving suit on it, and I have some cards that would make people think that this is it, so I can't use those. So the white player has the crypt, and I'm going to play this card for him because it looks like a castle, and a castle is a place where you might find a crypt. And for this player, I'm going to play this card, which has kind of a broken down, maybe shed building in it. Now granted, it's floating, and there's also a skull in it, but like I say, these cards have a lot of detail, and you just hope that they find the right amount. And this player is on Who. And all of the character cards have a profession that's pretty obvious, but they also have other details on their cards. In his case, he has the fisherman, which is this card right here. You can tell because there are fish hooks, there's fishing line, a seashell, a map, and in his picture, which he has a pipe in his mouth in the picture. So I'm going to try and find something that represents that. So I'm going to go with the very clearly underwater theme here. And hopefully he figures out that that means fisherman. The game will continue round by round until everyone has figured out who their character is. So someone, like say this person for instance, may finish each of those earlier. So he'll try to help the other people figure out what their locations or characters are in order to give them as much time as possible to be able to win the game. So let's go over how do you win the game. All right, let's say that it took them a couple of more days for everyone to figure out who their character was after they did their item and their location. So now they have a couple of more days to figure out who the culprit is before the game is over. So we've gotten rid of all the item and location cards. The only character cards that are left are the ones that match those that the ghost has. So when you're doing the character cards section of the game, the Who deduction part of the game, the cards that are correct do not go back to the box. And again, these are the cards for the investigators. You can set them aside or you can just flip them over as people figure out what they are because you're going to need them at the end of the game. So these cards match these cards. So what I'm going to do as the ghost is I'm going to take these cards and I'm going to shuffle them up without looking at them. And I'm going to choose one at random. I'm going to look at it and I know that that person is the culprit. So now it's my job as the ghost to give all the investigators clues to figure out who the actual murderer was. Again, I can give them as many clues as I want each turn, whatever I think is going to help them. In this case, I know that it is the policeman. Well, I have several magician cards in my hand. That doesn't really help. So I'm going to do the once per turn thing of discarding my hand and drawing up. Okay, so for this turn, I'm actually going to give them 3 cards. I'm going to give them this, there's a guy running down a hall running away from what looks like a ghostly swordsman, so I'm hoping they'll think, okay, he's stolen something, he's being chased by somebody else. We have another dream that has a bunch of houses, so there's maybe something to protect, and there's some military soldiers marching in, so maybe they'll think something military-like. And then I have what certainly looks like a villain, perhaps escaping on a train. So I'm thinking, hopefully if I put these 3 things together, they will be able to figure out who it is. If they guess wrong, and they'll point to the card, and I will let them know if it's wrong or not. I'll shake my head, or I'll say, yeah, we won the game. If they guess incorrectly, then the marker moves another day, and then I can give them more clues. But the clues that are on the table will stay there. so that they can continue to use them in future rounds. If we get to the last day, by the end of the day, if the investigators have not guessed who the person is, then everybody loses the game. If by the 7th day, before the 7th day, they guess who the person is out of these 3 characters, then everybody wins the game, and we've figured out who the real murderer is. Obviously, if you're playing with more people, you'll have more cards to choose from. And if you're playing on a higher difficulty, you'll have more cards to choose from. In the 2-player version of this game, you have one person playing the ghost and the other person playing 2 investigators. And that is how you play Mysterium with the current Polish rules, I think. I did it as close to what it is as I thought. If it's not exact, I'm sorry. And obviously it could change a little bit when it comes to the US, but the basic principle of the game will stay the same. Maybe the number of cards will change, or if they pick up the Ukrainian rules, then you'll be looking at you'll be looking at cards in the reverse order. You'll be doing character, location, and then item. I love this game. I can't wait for it to get to the US. I think it's going to be a huge hit. It's great for a wide variety of ages and a lot of people because there's practically no reading involved whatsoever. All you're doing is interpreting pictures. And the artwork, oh my god, the artwork. Oh, I just love it. I love looking at these cards. They are my favorite cards in any game, and I never thought that I would say that after playing Dixit because I love Dixit cards, but these are just, I mean, outstanding. And the production, even in the pre-US version, the production is wonderful with these nice thick character placards, with the artwork on them and the nice wooden pieces and the beautiful cards that are nice. They're similar to Dixit in their stock weight. Play this game. If you get a chance, play this game. If you like Clue and you like Dixit and you want to put those 2 things together, this is it. This is Clue Dixit. So thanks for watching the Dragon Table. I'll see you next time.